Mr. Entertainment himself, and with more tales, I'm sure, about Max Miller, but other things. Good morning, John Henty.
Yes, good morning, Keith. Good morning, world. You're this part of the world, indeed, and welcome everybody on a November morning with little activity, I have to say, out there at the moment. I was into Brighton yesterday, meeting with some Max Miller colleagues, as we've mentioned them before, Appreciation Society, and some of whom occasionally watch Mirador with pleasure and amusement, I think we can safely say. It was a very jolly day and very important, rather like Mirador in its own way, because it is a coming together, albeit here on screen, with you there wherever you are. But of course, we get together, as I've often mentioned, and I have to mention two rock cakes. We've discussed rock cakes before. In fact, food is very often food for thought, really, on Mirador. We've discussed sausages, I know, in the past at great length, the occasional reference to tomatoes, but rock cakes in particular have been a structure and a solid foundation for my existence in Brighton, which people may find hard to understand. And I perhaps should just explain, if I haven't already, that they were created by a man during the war when it was difficult to make any sort of cake, of course. I can remember that very clearly. I mean, I remember just after the war, even a sponge cake with the slightest touch of cream was a sheer delicacy, and how you enjoyed it. The tragedy about life today, of course, is that everywhere you go, there are cakes, the mass of cakes.
It's all cream and no cake.
It's all precisely right, and the eclairs are coming out of people's ears, and they're everywhere. Whereas a rock cake is somehow rather solid, a foundation almost for British society, the Rock of Ages. I think.
British Rail ran on it for years.
Oh my goodness me! Where were we without a British Rail rock cake, and preferably a curled up sandwich too? Always great fun. No, I mean, Bert used to make these rock cakes in the war, but that time less fat, etc. But he found a few currants as well, and they became very popular to the extent that when he created his little cafe in the Royal Pavilion Gardens, and anyone, of course, can go there, even today, for example, on a grotty day like today. Oh, yes, there's a lovely man there. Funnily enough, we talk about Max Miller. And again, I pay credit to this man because he helps out during the rather grotty weather when no one else ventures out. This man is called Windy, which I think is singularly appropriate. Windy Miller, funnily enough. Yes, not Max Miller, but Windy Miller.
Any relation?
No, unfortunately not. We've pressed him on the Max. People often say, did Max have any children? And we always make the point we don't think he did. He may have had nephews and nieces and a whole range of things, but when it came to kids, no. His marriage was stable and happy, but basically he was on the road the whole time, so he didn't get home an awful lot. What he did like, and we've mentioned this before, is he was very fond of parrots, funnily enough. So maybe parrots replaced, I mean, after all, parrots will talk to you. Aye! And they can answer back. Of course, there's one very famous parrot which I tip my hat to because he lives today and will probably outlive me and certainly Keith. His name is Archie, and he lives in Eastbourne, funnily enough, in a bookshop with this lady Camilla that I've mentioned before. Not the Camilla, by the way, not the Queen. But this is Camilla in Eastbourne, and she has this lovely, lovely parrot. It's an African grey or green, one of the two. And it talks and it listens and it makes little noises and it's lovely. And Max had more than one parrot, apparently. The only trouble is they can be a bit messy, as you know. You have to clear the cage out every so often. But overall, he had all these little parrots. And that was quintessentially in his various homes across Brighton and bits of Sussex. We've said before, he was always on the move. He had wealth towards the end of his life, was able to move into rather nice houses. in the early part, of course, he had no option, but he had to move into whatever they could find because they were an impoverished family. And that, of course, sadly, is the case today. A lot of people are doing just the same thing, going from room to room, which is unbearable and unthinkable. Bert, of course, was the rock. And if you wanted a decent rock cake, and I had one yesterday, that's why I mentioned it. I got there quite early for one reason or another. I think the trains were running. There's a surprise. The trains were running. And so I got an early train and I sat there in the grounds, the wonderful Royal Pavilion there, of course, the backdrop, which is superb, autumn colours everywhere. And there was probably me and Windy and a nice lady with a wonderful smile that you would really love. Her name is Teresa. And Teresa is always there and a constant in the kitchen, produces the most marvellous focaccia rolled up or bent sandwiches. She produces the most marvellous open sandwiches. You name it, she would do it. I mean, her smoked salmon and cream cheese, wonderful. And if you want the crusts cut off, she will even do that. Yesterday, though, when I got there at 10, I looked at the counter behind and I thought, oh my goodness me, this is bad news. There are no rock cakes. Wrong. Within seconds, they emerged from the kitchen. A small kitchen at the rear of this lovely cafe. And there was a plate of warm, hot rock cakes. Superb. And I said, well, I think I'll have a little bit of butter with that. So I said, oh, it's a bit solid, this butter, these butter packs. I said, don't worry, I will put it under the rock cake as it sat on the plate and it melted beautifully. And therefore I had this marvellous, and it was so
buttered
good.
rock cake.
Oh,
yes.
Yes, in a way, butter adds something. You have to be careful of your cholesterol and all the rest of it. But just a little pat of butter and this rock cake was superb. And then I was joined all by these other people, the sort of people that you would really like. For example, there was Jack who watches this, and then right at the end, a man that you would absolutely adore, a real character, a man who claims to have danced with Gene Kelly, believe it or not. Oh yes, danced with Gene Kelly, and there's a wonderful singer, chanteuse in France. Was it Josephine Baker? I think her name was Josephine Baker, famous in France. And there's a gentleman there with beard and glasses.
Yeah.
Yes.
You'll have your beer in a minute.
Oh dear.
God, that was hard.
I'm afraid so. Yes. We had a friend seeking a beer at the wrong time of day, I think we can safely say.
Yeah.
But
I think he'd found some beer at the wrong time of the day already.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
I refused to serve him when he came. I said, no, you had enough already.
Well, there you are, you see.
Yeah.
And that's why I changed the time from 10:30 to 11. we are allowed to serve from 10:30.
Exactly, but within limits.
Yeah.
And I think there has to be limits.
Yes.
Beard and glasses, you see, intelligent man.
Absolutely.
Moment I saw him,
there we go.
there is
Yes.
and responsible for
Yes.
which requires a fair amount of. Anyway, so I got back to the rock cakes. There were all these lovely people, and then this man Peter turned up, the one who's danced with Gene Kelly.
Right.
This was in a rather strange situation where they went to see a musical separately. Both obviously thought it was a bit duff and didn't like it. And Sinatra was in the little lounge bar, probably looking for a beer or something. And there was Gene Kelly. And I think they got talking, as one does. And I think they got onto the subject of what Peter knew about. And they actually did do a little dance. Not singing in the rain, of course. That was the famous Gene Kelly, wasn't it?
Right.
What a marvellous film.
Who was it to dance with him? Who was the female partner?
Oh my goodness, singing in the rain. Now you've really got a question there. Do you know? No.
Yeah, I don't. I've got it in my mind.
The actual singing in the rain was very much a solo with him, wasn't it?
Yes.
With an umbrella and everything.
I mean, who knows if they say yes?
Wonderful sequence. Every Christmas, I mean, it's either the African Queen or it's singing in the rain. The lovely thing is, I mean, so many films today, you say, well, I didn't think much of that. Would you bother to see it again? No, you wouldn't. The essence of those wonderful films from the past, 40s and 50s. You could see them
Oh,
over and
no.
over
Oh, yeah, what down there?
and see little things that you may have missed the first time round.
Exactly.
So there we are. How on earth we got on
I always
to rock
find that a
cakes,
bit
I don't
frightening
know,
because
except they were
it-
delicious. And I
the
would
balance is
recommend
all
they're
over
easy
the
to
place,
make
but
as
we
well.
can
They're
do
not
it,
too
yeah, I can
difficult
do
to
it.
make, he said, never having actually made one.
But I love rock cake. Yeah,
Oh.
they're wonderful.
My speciality, funnily enough, and I discussed this on another occasion, I have been known,
I can
this
leave
will
it
amuse the management at home, I have been known to make a pretty good Victoria sponge. And that's quite tricky, you see, because it's no good having it, it's got to rise.
Keep
you
them
see.
over.
And so
I-
that's another
I've
thing.
tried it.
But I don't really, I'm not too handy in the kitchen. And I have to say that with instant food today, and microwaves and all the rest of it, it's not the same.
That's
It's not the same.
Yeah.
But that's how I rely. Now, there was another subject we touched on last week, because you were talking about, I mean, we're both collectors in the same way, aren't we not?
Yes, we are.
We love collecting odds and bods and
Okay.
can never resist a little object. an
I'll
interesting
just
object.
tell.
And you mentioned to me a tractor. Do you remember
Yes,
that?
indeed.
You said you got this miniature tractor.
That's right.
That's
Yes.
right. Which is part of a little layout that
That's
you've
right,
got.
yes.
What a lovely idea, a small tractor. And I said to you, and then I thought I mustn't forget this. So I wrote it down ahead. I said tractor, Keith, you see. And would you believe it? This morning I brought my tractor with
Oh,
me.
wonderful. Wonderful. I can't wait to see the tractor.
Well, this is a very special tractor, I have to say. And I can tell you a little bit about it as well. I've got the bag over here, which has got rather a lot of things in it, and a tractor. There's not many bags that carry tractors. Here's the bag again.
This is the famous bag.
No.
You never know what's going to come out of
You
this.
have no idea what's going to come out of it. I have got one of these, actually, which is an umbrella, because it's slightly inclement out there. at the moment.
Yes, and
Oh.
you can't tell quite what's going to happen.
You can't tell that.
Yes,
But
yes.
this object is, it's.
Oh, that is quite magnificent.
Can you see it, everybody?
Yes.
That really is
It is.
absolutely amazing. It is tin plate. It is tin plate. It has got solid rubber wheels. And it has got a steering wheel. Let me demonstrate the steering wheel. I think everybody can see the front of the wheels.
We
Look at that, the steering
you
wheel.
can't.
Like that.
Too.
And then, as I think I mentioned, it's got a brake as well.
Then
It's got a
John will
brake.
be back.
And even
Yeah,
more amazing, it has got